To understand the importance of providing explanations of the first one and of the second one, consider the fact that both Aristotle and David Hume were proponents of moral theories that could be classified as types of virtue ethics. So, of course, these two guys, Aristotle and David Hume, are going to be so at odds with each other. So it's interesting that she's pulling them together to say, well, if you want to be a virtue ethicist, then you also have to deal with the likes of people being in your camp that are the same but also different. And Aristotle and Hume are going to be figures, she says, that consider something like humility to not be a virtue but a vice. So humility is something that, of course, the Christian is going to look at and say, well, that was one of a main point that Jesus brought to us, especially in contrast with people of his day. And so, if we're going to be virtue ethicists and some of the people in our camp are saying that something like humility is a vice rather than a virtue, something that shouldn't happen, but and not something to be cultivated, then we have to you're going to have to deal with that. So she goes on to say that the question for Hume, Aristotle, and Kahlenberg, and any other virtue ethicist is this: what rationale is being used to determine whether any particular trait, and by extension, humility in particular, should be classified as a virtue, a vice, or neither? So I'm hungry. Is that a virtue or a vice, or is it neither? I want to gorge on food. Is that a virtue, a vice, or is it neither? Well, is it always a virtue? Does it have certain restrictions for different time periods? And so all these questions come out that she's saying that virtue ethicists don't really have a clear, concise way of providing a standard by which you can classify these things. She goes on to say that no such rationale is forthcoming. We have been given no reason for thinking that the traits that the thinker in question calls virtues really are morally good, or that the ones she labels vices really are morally bad. So without that basis, you're kind of left at the whim of individualistic rationale of virtue. And if that's the case, well, then everyone did what was right in their own eye. So in the book of Judges, everyone is virtuous, right? So obviously Kahlenberg is not going to hold to that view. And so he has to be able to provide more, which Peterson here is claiming that the role of the virtue ethicist isn't able to give you that standard. But she's saying, though, that the natural law does provide a good basis for that. And from there, you can be a good and virtuous person.
Right. And she goes on to say, thus, any ethical theory that emphasizes the virtues need to do more than simply argue for the moral significance of stable character traits, right? And provide a list of the traits that its proponents believe to be virtues. You need to do more than that, she suggests. She says to be complete, the theory needs also to explain why its proponents prefer traits, the traits that they prefer are virtues. Why are they virtues? And how we should understand particular traits. And thus, she says, a rationale for classifying humility, for instance, as a virtue should also help us to at least begin to identify the key differences between, say, humility and low esteem, or even just low self-regard. What's the difference? And how do we distinguish those, right? Mm-hmm. You need to be able to do that. And so this is what she tells us she's getting at when she says that a complete ethical theory needs to identify a context for the virtues so that we can have a clear understanding of what we're talking about and what is a virtue and how we define it.
Mm-hmm.